you.
Members from the Land Transport Authority and of course members of
Good afternoon, Chairman of LTA, the board members, Permanent Secretary, and the staff of LTA. Thank you for being here this afternoon, and thank you indeed for the time that you waited. I have much pleasure in also announcing this afternoon to you as to why we are here today, and that is that the implementation of the job evaluation exercise that has been carried out by the LTA board. You may recall in the budget that was announced last year in June, and when it was approved in July, we had set aside funding for the LTA to carry out a job evaluation exercise and also to be able to facilitate within its own budget allocation to allow for any pay rises that would, in fact would be effected into the budget and into this financial year. PricewaterhouseCoopers was the company that was chosen by the LTA board to carry out the assessment. Now, how does a job evaluation exercise actually work out? And this was similarly something that was done with the civil servants overall. And the way it is done is that they look at the market to see what other organizations are getting paid. Now, it also, prior to that even, we need to be able to ensure that we specifically highlight and set out what each person does. Not the individual, but what the position actually requires you to do. So if you are a traffic infringement officer, what is your scope of work? What are the hours? What kind of skill sets do you require? Then based on that, an assessment is done. It's not done because Ram Prasad holds it or Polyasi holds it. It's because what that job requires one to do. And what are the qualifications required, for example, amongst other things that's required for the job to be fulfilled. Now, when that assessment is done, it is done in comparison to the market. There's a couple of ways of looking at it. One of the ways, of course, is that you can say, let's only compare the salaries of what they're getting or the positions that are held amongst other statutory organizations. So in a way, one can argue it can be quite limited because you're only looking at statutory organizations. The other way, of course, is to look at the entire market to see what even the private sector is actually paying for those types of positions. Of course, not always the role that a particular position or the duties that a particular position requires may not always necessarily may actually require or may be actually available in the private sector itself. But that's what you call the benchmarking. And then once the assessment is done, then the organization that's going to implement the job evaluation exercise is normally given a number of options. So they'll say, well, look, you can pay 80% of what the market is paying, or you can pay 100% of the market is paying. Sometimes they recommend you can pay 120% of what the market is paying. In your case, ladies and gentlemen, your board has decided you'll get paid 100% of what the market is paying. So not less, you get 100% of what the market is paying. Now in this exercise, of course, you'll also find out that some of you are getting paid exactly the same as what the market is paying. Some of you are getting paid less than what the market is paying. Some of you are getting paid the same as what the market is paying. So with this evaluation exercise, there are people who, because of the positions they hold, and that position demands a particular salary increase or decrease, but nobody's getting a decrease. You'll either remain on the same salary or you will get a pay rise. Now, the other point, of course, is that once we've done, this is what you call the benchmarking. So you benchmarked all the salaries, so brought it up to the right level it should be. What happens going forward? As you've done in the civil service, going forward, you'll be assessed individually on your own performance. So assuming that there is 10 of you as traffic examiners or motor vehicle examiners, for example, there's 10 of you. Now out of the 10 of you, 5 of you may be actually doing really well, coming to work on time, going the extra mile. Out of the 5, 3 may be going the extra mile. The other 5, 2 of them may be coming to work, half an hour late every day, combing their hair at 4 o'clock to leave at 4:30, taking 1 hour tea break, etc. Now, if you say, well, because they're all examiners, let's all give them the pay rise, you actually, after the base, you're actually disincentivizing those people who are working hard. You say, what's the point of me working hard? What's the point of me coming to work on time? What's the point of me going the extra mile when these other jokers who aren't doing the work are also getting a pay rise? It's a disincentive for them. And the other people who are actually not doing their work well are still getting a pay rise. They might as well continue with this pattern of behavior. So this is what we call individual performance. So after this, because we're getting the base right now for all of you, going forward now, you will actually be assessed individually. And you then have, of course, the potential to be able to get higher pay rises. And you'll be assessed on that basis. So it is very critically important that your HR people, of course, roll out the job descriptions very specifically. I know fundamentally in Fiji there has been a problem in particular with the civil service, in particular with state-owned enterprises, in particular with statutory bodies, that there is a culture that we seem to be able to get, for example, things like promotions that used to be based on how many years you've been in the service. So if some of you may be 10 years in the service and the other person may be 5 years in the service, then the person who's been in the service for 10 years believes that they should get the next promotion, not the person done 5 years. That culture, we need to get rid of it. Because the person who's been in the system for 10 years may not actually be a good performer, but the person who's been there for 5 years may be a high flyer. And that person should be equally considered for that position when they apply for it. This is what we talk about OMRS, Open Merit Recruitment System. We have seen an increase in the number of females who are getting appointed. Because generally, as we found in the civil service, that tended to be very gender specific, or there used to be sort of patriarchal notions, so women tend to get marginalized. When you have OMRS, everybody gets assessed on the same basis. Sometimes I've heard, in fact, in 2007 when we came in, a lot of people say, well, we should not give her the position, it's a fairly senior position, and she might get pregnant. People still do that. And we cannot do that anymore because the Constitution, for the first time, specifically says it's unfair discrimination on the basis of one's pregnancy capacity, or even if one is pregnant. So we need to be able to understand that by implementing this particular system, you are opening up the doors for yourself and for your own individual career development. It also, you don't have to sort of wait every 5 or 10 years and then everybody sort of goes for one big negotiation and gets a 5% pay rise. Who knows, when you do your assessment, you may get a much bigger pay rise after that. So individual performance is very, very critical to that. Now, in your particular case, just to give you some examples, because obviously we can't say, Mr. X has got this much of a pay rise, and somebody else got this much of a pay rise, but I can tell you in respect of the different positions. So overall, there's about 430 staff, of course, that you have in LTA, and I'd like to also make some comments afterwards about LTA itself. There are about 4 different categories of the percentages of increases. So for example, there's about 6 staff that have got that are getting pay rises over 51%. So those kind of positions are assistant transport planner, your operation analyst, the advanced driver training instructor. These are the kind of pay rise they'll get over 50%, over 51%. Some people are getting fairly hefty pay rises. In fact, one of the positions they're getting an 86% pay rise because the job requires that. Similarly, I can tell you, for example, in the civil service, we have specialist nurses who've got pay rise up to 70 to 80%. We have land surveyors who've got pay rise up to 30 to 40%. Of course, there are others who've got a pay rise of 3% because their salaries, in fact, are very much similar to the market. But that does not mean when you do your review within 12 months or 18 months, you don't have the opportunity to get another pay rise because of the performance. So everybody has the opportunity to get that performance recognition. Similarly, for example, between 31 to 50%, vehicle examiners, for example, are getting a pay rise of up to 47%. Infringement processing officers are getting a pay rise up to 49%. Then you have the 21 to 30% bracket. You have people like call center reps, driving examiners, senior vehicle examiners, senior public transport officers. I'm not reading out all of them, but I'm reading out some of them. Public service vehicle officers, customer service officers, road safety officers, all of them fall within the category or bracket of 21 to 30% pay rises. Then of course, last but not least, those who have received pay rises increase in excess, or below, sorry, I should say, of 20%. There's about 145 staff. There are about 34 staff who are not getting any increase because of the benchmark, because the salaries that they already have is actually in alignment with the market. But of course, they have an opportunity when you do the review of your individual performance to get a recognition of that and a pay rise in respect of that. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the announcement I'd like to make. Of course, it's going to cost LTA in excess of $2 million, this pay rise. All this pay rise being given is going to cost in excess of $2 million. Government has, of course, allocated funding. It is less than $2 million, but we've actually agreed to top it up. So LTA then can actually pay all of you that pay increment. So pay rise, of course, is something that is one factor in respect of your career advancement, and to give you job satisfaction. Money is not always everything. We have to always ensure that the work environment that you are in, the equipment that you have, the office environment that you have, the relationships that you have with each other, and your ability to move within the system on a career path, and for you to have that level of confidence is very, very important. So you should know that you can actually have a career path. You should know that when you actually apply for a job within the organization itself, that you will be treated fairly, there won't be any discrimination, that everybody will be given an opportunity. Those are the very critical issues that must be taken on the board. So that's the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, I have to make. I can give you the exact figures. I think $2.4 million. About $2.4 million will cost LTA to give you the pay rise. And of course, we'll have to factor that into this upcoming budget that will be delivered in June of this year. And of course, going forward, we'll also make provisions that wherever there is any recognition of your service delivery, your individual performance, the LTA has enough funding to be able to pay for that. No organization, ladies and gentlemen, can do without its people. And it's very, very critical, therefore, that the organization must look after its people. But on the same side, conversely, the organization can be the people can be the greatest stumbling block to any organization. If you don't do your job well, if you actually don't follow the processes, if you are corrupt, if you are taking bribes, if you are leaking out information, then you do not belong in the organization. Period. It's simple as that. I've seen some correspondence recently from some of the staff from LTA writing on an ethnic basis, talking about ethnic representation on board, talking about ethnic representation on management. That does not matter. People need to be appointed on merit. Very soon I've seen other organizations where people write on provincial basis. Oh, there's too many people from Laos, or too many people from Dakon Drove. It needs to stop. Because your organization will never progress if you're going to start thinking along those lines. Obviously, some people are thinking along those lines. Don't try and do some side swipe to go along to other authorities to try and influence and provide misinformation. The government's objective is to ensure that every single entity in Fiji, wherever government has any relationship, for example, you provide funding, for example, your organization, for example, Fiji Revenue and Customs Authority, and various other organizations, we will make sure that the right amount of money is made available so those organizations can look after their staff, that their staff are actually rewarded. and making sure that the systems are in place so the staff actually can get appointed on merit, the right people get chosen, and that you become an employer of choice. People should look up to you to say, I want to go and work at LTA. A few years ago when I was in Singapore, I went to see the Minister for Transport there. He also looks after civil aviation. And I saw outside in the building where they had a huge building of the Transport Authority. And I saw all these primary school kids there. And I said, what are they doing here? He said, no, we're trying to encourage them to come and join our organization when they finish university. That's how early a period they start. That's how they try and attract people. Because all the organizations believe they must attract the good people to the organizations to make sure the organizations run well. Today you have enormous challenges in a very positive sense. There are more cars in the road than ever before in Fiji. You now have 4-lane roads. You have more young people. Today in Fiji, 50% of the population is below the age of 27. 70% of the population is below the age of 40. What does that mean for you? More young people, more energy, driving fast, wanting to purchase more amenities, more facilities, more cars. It poses enormous challenges. This is the day of ITC. People want access to service. They don't want to know that you only work from 8:30 to 4:30. They don't want to know that you finish work on Friday. They want to be able to access service on a Saturday. You have, of course, opened some offices. They don't want to be able to, when they come to your counter, and say, go to 3 different people before you finish your process. They want to come to one counter and finish the process then and there. So how are you making your business more attractive? How are you making yourselves a lot more savvy in respect of this day and age of social media? Please go and screen the social media and see how many complaints of LTA there are. It's a fact. Unfortunately, you are at the forefront. You are one of those organizations where you have more people contact than most other organizations. It's like, for example, downstairs in this building, the first floor is the BDM, Birth, Deaths and Marriages, where everybody actually has to go to BDM. So before in Fiji, only a few years ago, to register your child, you could only go to Suva, Lautoka, Lamasa. No BDM offices any other place. It was such a chore. When we did a scan, we went out, there were something like 70,000 Fijians who did not have a birth certificate. And the age range was from 6 months to 75 years old. The people who were 75 years old in Fiji who did not even have a birth certificate. What did the system do? What did the BDM office do to address that? Nothing. We sent out teams to all the maritime islands, deep rural areas, villages that people never visited, to get them registered. Why? Because it's critical to do so. You know, we recently had the census, everybody talks about census. In Singapore, they no longer do census because the information is caught every day. They have enough systems in place, such good systems in place, they know exactly how many people are doing what on a daily basis. We do it every 10 years. So there's a lot of room for improvement. What I'm trying to urge you to do is for you to be able to put your heads together and work as a team, and to be able to tell your management, to be able to tell your board, how can we improve LTA? How can we make it a lot more customer service? There are a lot of complaints people have said about sometimes your enforcement officers out on the roads, the demeanor with which they come across. People send us text messages, or the guy spoke to me rudely. He had his sunglasses up here, or had his sunglasses on, I could not even see his eyes. He's wearing shorts and a t-shirt with tattoos on one arm. I did not know whether he was even an LTA officer or not. I mean, these are very basic things. We need to understand that this is, in this day and age, people know about these things. A lot more people are aware of their rights. A lot more people are aware, a lot more people travel. They go overseas, and they may get pulled up in Australia and New Zealand. When they get pulled up, they don't have somebody coming to base. You're doing fast, eh? What do you think you're doing? That's how people talk to each other. That's how people talk, enforcement officers, some of them, to the people who get pulled over. What happens overseas? Excuse me, sir. You've been speeding, or can we please have a look at your tail light? So when you actually are in a position of authority, you should be able to have a lot more humility to be able to exercise that authority. And that will win you a lot of accolades. That's just one aspect of it. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad that government is able to facilitate this. We strongly urge you to work together with the board and the management. You've been given a substantial pay rise. A majority of you have been given substantial pay rise. And this will get implemented from what I understand from your next pay, which I understand is next Friday. You still get paid on Fridays. Government gets paid on Thursdays, but you get paid on Fridays, so your pay will be effective from next Friday for those of you who are getting the vast chunk of the increase. I'd like to thank, of course, the chair and the board. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of reorganization, restructuring that needs to be done within LTA. And that obviously needs to be done in respect of making sure that the processes are streamlined. We have, of course, new initiatives that you also have carried off, apart from Ministry of Communications, such as e-ticketing. And we look forward to the board to, of course, making sure that gets fully implemented. These things actually, ladies and gentlemen, makes us step into the 21st century, makes us modern, but we also need to ensure that we look after our fundamental customers at the end of the day. We all should be concerned about are the ordinary men and women, the ordinary Fijians of our country. And if we deliver our service to them and making sure that at the end of the day, ultimately, they are paying for your salary right increase, they are paying for everything that's here through the taxes that they pay, then we'll be able to have a better level of connectivity. So thank you once again. I'm quite happy to take any questions if you have any questions. But once again, thank you for your work. Let's work together to ensure that we build a culture of service orientation in this country. The more service orientated we are, the better our country will be. Our GDP per capita was doubled since 2006. That's why you see so many cars on the road, because people are able to afford it. And you, of course, not just through motor vehicles, but of course other services are, providing that responsibility in respect of ensuring that we have trajectory in our economy. Thank you very much, and all the best. Thank you. Load. Okay, very important job. When is it coming up?